I'm James Swanwick. This is the Alcohol Free Lifestyle Podcast, where you learn to live a life of health, wealth, love, and happiness.
Do you find yourself getting nervous and anxious about socializing, going out with particular friends and telling them that you're no longer drinking? If you do feel that way, you're certainly not alone. It's one of the biggest obstacles that people speak about when they are discussing the idea that they'd like to be alcohol free, but there's all these blockages in the way. There's all these obstacles that they're afraid that they won't be able to overcome. Welcome to the show. My name's Sarah Connelly. I'm a coach in the Alcohol Free Lifestyle program. And I've been navigating my life alcohol free for just over 4 years. Today I'm going to share with you my experience in the first few months of being alcohol free and how I navigated those challenges with friends, people that I was actually quite nervous and self-conscious about telling that I wasn't drinking anymore. So I want you to imagine I was just leaving. I just finished my final day in a 2-week inpatient rehab program. And I was feeling pretty excited. You might say that I was on cloud 9 to a degree, because prior to going into that clinic, I had been able to quit alcohol for periods of time, but as soon as that time was over, I just couldn't wait to pick up another drink. But this time was somehow different. I'd decided to celebrate myself for having managed 2 weeks alcohol free, and also had really immersed myself in the 2-week program, where I learnt a lot about myself, a lot about alcohol, and a lot about addiction. And so to celebrate, I decided to go to the hairdresser. It was a Friday afternoon, and I walked down. It wasn't that far away. It was a really beautiful night in Brisbane, where I live in Australia. And I was feeling pretty excited. I was feeling pretty accomplished and very strong and resolute in my new non-drinking persona. I got to the hairdresser. It was quite a fancy hairdresser here in Brisbane City. And as soon as I walked in, my eyes scanned the room and I could see champagne in glasses next to some of the women that were sitting getting their hair done. And immediately felt it was like, that's not available to me. And I started to panic inside. Thankfully, I had learned a few skills over the last 2 weeks. So I just started to breathe and calm myself down, and had the voice in my head saying, it's okay, you don't need to drink, you're okay. But it was my first challenge. And this beautiful young girl came and, checked me in. And as she took me to my seat, she asked me what I would like to drink. She handed me a menu. She said, it's Friday night, so we have wine and champagne and beer, whatever you want. Now, bearing in mind that this was a celebration moment for me, and historically celebrations were always about drinking, I had to draw on all of my resolve, my determination. And I looked at the young girl and I said, for the very first time since the rehab, I said, I don't drink. And it was like I was saying no to something that I really, really wanted. I almost had imagined when you're a child and you don't get the chocolate or the lollipop. It felt like that. But I said no, and I looked up at her, and she turned to me and she said, wow, that's amazing. What, you don't drink? You've never drunk? Tell me about it. And so my first response and my feeling to that question was relief, because she hadn't judged and she certainly hadn't pushed or cajoled me into drinking. And so I started to tell her. I didn't tell her the whole story. I didn't know her after all, but I said I made a decision to stop drinking, and I feel great. And she started to talk to me about her own problems with alcohol and her relationship. And gosh, we did a total role reversal, because normally it's the hairdresser that gets to hear all the juicy gossip. But she started to tell me about her life, and she was quite young, and she said it's really hard. You know, everybody drinks and I feel like I'm drinking too much, and on she went. And I started to feel really confident in my position, in my decision not to drink. Now, it's funny, I'm not sure what I believe about universe sending us things, but as we're sitting there and she's telling me all about her drinking, and I'm feeling really strong and confident, I get a phone call. And I noticed the number, and it's a number that I haven't seen for a really, really long time. And bizarrely, it is the number of my flatmate that I used to live with back in the day, in Bondi, in Sydney. Really good friend of mine. We lived together for a long time, and we shared a lot of wine together. We had a lot of fun. We spent a lot of time partying, drinking together, smoking together. She was a really, really dear friend, and we'd lost touch over the years. But there she was, ringing me up in this random day. I'm in the hairdresser, just out of rehab. She tells me straight away, Sarah, where are you? Where are you? I'm in Brisbane. I'm like, this is insane. She's in Brisbane. And she then tells me, I'm at this hotel. It's a new hotel. It's called the Connelly. I'm with my sister. I just wondered if by any chance you were anywhere nearby and you could pop in for a drink. Now, how's that? How's that for a challenge? And to add to the story, she was across the street. The hairdresser that I was in was directly opposite the hotel that my friend was in. And I didn't think this at the time, because I was in such shock and I was so horrified and mortified and scared and confused. But looking back, I realised that this was, a make or break moment for me. I'd committed to being alcohol free. Alcohol had brought me to a point where I felt like my drinking was unsustainable. I didn't want to do it anymore. It made me feel terrible. I didn't like who I was. And yet, right in that moment was my past. Out of nowhere, out of the blue. Somebody who I really loved deeply as a friend, and who, with her, my whole identity was drinking Sarah. And I remember just making an excuse at the time, saying, look, I'm in the hairdresser, you can probably hear the noise in the background. Can I call you back? I'll get back to you in just a moment. Put the phone down, didn't tell her where I was, and had to just really take a few moments to consider my options. In that moment, I could have, and very nearly did, say no. Because there was a moment there where I felt like if I met her, I would go back. All the hard work that I'd put in, all my resolve was teetering on the edge of slipping back into my old patterns, going into those old thought patterns of, well, look, it's a special occasion. She's only here once. You haven't seen her for 5 years. Surely you can just have one or two to be social. But something else was a lot stronger. That inner voice, the part of me that had woken up to this real acceptance that alcohol was not good for me. Me and alcohol, just a bad combination. And the part of me that wanted to completely break up that relationship. So I picked up my phone, I texted, I didn't think about it anymore. I said, sure, I'll be over in about 20 minutes. And as soon as I'd made that decision, I think it's like making any decision. You know, being on the fence and procrastinating is painful, takes up a lot of time and energy. And once I'd made that decision, it was like, oh, okay, decision made, I'm going to go. And I walked over to the hotel. I had really good hair. And there I saw my friend and her sister sitting at the bar, having a cocktail. And I walked straight over, picked up the menu. You know, I was like, hi, so good to see you. Oh my goodness, it was wonderful to see her. And I ordered a Diet Coke. And she was like, what? What are you doing? And I looked her in the eye and I said, I'm not drinking. I don't drink anymore. And it was easy. It was so much easier than I'd imagined. And the truth is, I don't actually remember what she said in response because I was so present to my own resolve, my own decision, my own mindset at the time that I didn't care what the response was. And perhaps because of that moment, because of everything that transpired on that last day that I was in the rehab, I don't know if maybe that was the reason why I ended up being so resolute and have been for such a long time. That decision to say no for myself with no care factor for what anybody else thought, and then to be faced with somebody who I deeply cared for and really was concerned about what she thought, and being able to say no to her was extremely powerful, I think, for my sense of confidence moving forward. I sat in the hotel with her and her sister for around 2.5 hours, I believe, from memory. And the two of them were drinking, and I started to notice for the first time how alcohol starts to take the light out of people's eyes as you're talking to them over time. Maybe the light in my eyes was particularly bright because I was on a high from 2 weeks of feeling a real sense of achievement. But I remember noticing very clearly how over that 2-hour period, the light in their eyes started to dull down, and my feeling that I was present with other human beings became less and less. I began to feel more and more separate and less engaged. And I realised that most of my adult life had been spent in what I now see as a state of half-life when socialising with other people, a state of semi-presence, a state of being just completely disconnected from what's actually going on in the moment. It was, for me, a very powerful experience, as you can probably tell from the memories that I'm sharing. And so the interesting thing is, I think the title of this podcast is, I told my friends I wasn't drinking, what did they say? Or something along those lines. I'm not sure exactly what it is, but the answer is to that question, I have no idea, because I really didn't care.
Hi, I'm James Swanwick. Have you downloaded my free alcohol freedom formula yet? If not, you can go to alcoholfreelifestyle.com/guide. You can download it. It will outline the same process that we walk our clients through in our flagship 90-day stop drinking program. You'll also get an email from me each day with tips and tricks to reduce or stop drinking, to improve your health, nutrition, mobility, and lots of other great mindset techniques. That's alcoholfreelifestyle.com/guide.
There's lots of more stories about my journey, which I'll share with you on other episodes, of course. But what I want to share in this episode is that if you worry more about what other people think than you do about your own desire for your own health, well-being, sense of peace of mind, self-respect, then that's something to really pay attention to. I get that we all want to be liked. I want to be liked. We all want to be accepted and part of the group, but at what cost? And as I became clearer and clearer about what I wanted and what I valued in my own life, the thoughts, judgments, and criticisms and comments from other people just became white noise. And that's incredibly freeing as you move through your journey, because after you've overcome arguably one of the greatest obstacles to being alcohol-free, you then are able to take that same attitude and approach to a lot of other things in your life. And you start to realize that many of the things that you have been doing are potentially compromises based on what other people think about you. Fear of judgment, fear of people thinking something about you that's negative. And letting go of that was a big step for me, which started on that day as I walked from the hairdresser with my good hair, my heart in my throat, into a bar, faced with a very dear friend. All the memories we had together were drinking related. Massive opportunity for me to undo all of the work that I'd done, but to go back to the familiar, to the safe, to the comfort of drinking, and being able to say no in that moment had a huge impact on the rest of my alcohol-free journey. So my invitation from my experience is that if telling people that you're not drinking is a huge challenge for you, something that really worries you, then the questions that need to be asked are, what is it about these people that's more important than me to myself? What is it that I value more about others' opinions of me than my own opinion of me? And as you become clearer on that and more confident, you will start to realize that, well, firstly, people really don't care about your drinking as much as perhaps you think they do. Secondly, they care more about their own drinking than they care about your drinking. And thirdly, once you don't care, or you care more about how you feel about yourself than how others feel about you, you let go. It's not a problem anymore. And the interesting and really cool thing about it, as I'm sure you'll know, if you know somebody in your life that is just resolute about certain things, is clear, is calm, communicates in a way that's not confrontational or judgmental or like they're trying to change anybody else. If you know somebody like that, think about how you feel about that person. You know, when we see people like that in the world, we look up to them, we admire them, we respect them for their resolve, for their commitment, and for their knowledge of themselves. And that is something that I admire greatly in others, and started to realize as I became more and more confident that it was something that I could really begin to cultivate and value in myself. Thank you for listening, for joining the podcast, and I look forward to sharing some more stories with you over the coming months. In the meantime, be kind to yourself, take care. Thank you for listening.